قد أفلح المؤمنون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Respected Muslim brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all for tuning in to part 2 of our dissection of the biography of Sayyiduna Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman. Now, in the previous part, we were going over how Hudhayfa had a secret. He was the keeper of Rasulullah's big secret, and that was that he knew the names of the munafiqeen. He knew the names of the people who tried to assassinate the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, today we're going to continue where we left off. Last time we went over the identity of one of the more infamous of these munafiqeen, and that was Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. And we proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was a munafiq. And I think even some of our Shia viewers are just amazed at how point blank it was, how easy it was to prove that Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was one of these munafiqeen. However, today we are going to be focusing on another one of these hypocrites. We're going to continue with the biography of Hudhayfa and his interactions with one of these people. And that person here that we're going to begin with is Umar ibn al-Khattab. Now, I will warn the audience before we begin that today's episode is going to be very humorous. Today's breakdown is going to be very humorous, and I'm not going to explain why. I'm just going to let it speak for itself. Okay, we're going to narrate this to you, and we're going to let you figure out why we think it's so funny. Okay, because this is one of the most hilarious examples of someone shooting themselves in the foot that I've ever seen. Okay, it's up there with Ibn Hazm and Ibn Abdul Barr. This is not good. Okay, so continuing where we left off, Ali ibn al-Athir reports in his book An-Nihaya fi Gharib al-Hadith, which is a book that goes over strange terminology in reports of hadith. So in Kitab al-Nihaya, on page 865, he says the following. He says, under the definition of the word mars, فيه أن عمر أراد أن يصلي على ميت فمرزه حذيفة أي قرصه بأصابعه لئلا يصلي عليه. So it says here that Umar wanted to pray over someone. He wanted to pray over someone, and so Hudhayfa gave him a pinch. And so this report indicates that Hudhayfa was telling Umar, this guy is one of the munafiqeen. You cannot pray over this man. And so this report highlights how Umar knew that Hudhayfa knew who these people are. Okay? Now, what I'm about to show you next is, as I said, one of the most humorous reports that I have ever gone over, that I've ever gathered. And we're going to mention a few sources for this report. It can be found in Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah. It can be found in Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal. It can be found in Al-Ma'rifah wa Tarikh by Al-Fasawi. It can be found in Musnad al-Bazzar. And it can be found in Kitab al-Sunnah by Al-Khallal. All of which report with their chains of transmission, with their asanid, that once on the authority of Zayd ibn Wahab reports that a man from the munafiqeen who tried to assassinate Rasulullah died. So Hudhayfa did not attend his funeral. So Umar asked Hudhayfa, he said to him, is he one of the hypocrites? So Hudhayfa replied in the affirmative. Hudhayfa says, yes, Umar, he is one of the hypocrites. So then Umar asks this amazing question. Umar asks Hudhayfa, by Allah, am I one of them? So Hudhayfa says to Umar, no, and I will not inform anyone regarding this matter after you. So a few things to go over. As I said, there are numerous sources for this. We're not going to go over all of them, but we are going to throw a few of them up on the screen for you guys to see, including Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah. Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah, volume 21, page 294 to page 295, hadith 40,173. And the report is sahih. The Muhaqqiq says that this report is sahih. As well as Kitab Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, volume 44, page 290 to 291, hadith 26,694. Okay? Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the Muhaqqiq of Musnad Ahmad, who I believe in this volume was, one of them is Shu'aib al-Arnaut, he graded Isnaduhu Sahih. Correct? So, the narrators are all the Rijal of the Shaykhain. This is the highest level of authenticity. Why is this report important, and why do I believe it's humorous? Imagine there was a crime. Okay? There was a crime in your city. And so you are one of the people in the crowd, watching the police, you're standing behind the police line as you're watching the investigation. So you go up to one of the detectives, okay? You go to Detective Abdul. Say, Detective Abdul, am I a suspect? Was I here? Did I commit this crime? So what is Detective Abdul going to do to you? I want all of you listening at home to think about this very critically for a minute. What is Detective Abdul going to do to you for asking this question? Even if you weren't a suspect, by asking, you are a suspect now. Because what do you mean, am I one of the hypocrites? Like, how do you not know that you are one of the hypocrites? So we would say here that what Umar was doing, he was making sure that Hudhayfa would not tell anyone. He wanted to be sure that Hudhayfa would not expose him. And so Hudhayfa said to Umar, he says, no, you are not one of them. And so this was Taqiyah. We know very well that this was Taqiyah because, as we will see in some of the reports we're going to go over, that Hudhayfa was an expert at using Taqiyah with the rulers. And this is something that has been recorded in the authentic traditions. Correct? Now, the other thing I want to point out, someone may claim, because the Mukhalifeen, when we think critically, because the Mukhalifeen, as many of you know, they believe that aql and using aql is kufr. When you start letting that kafir aql of yours, when you start thinking critically, you start coming up with all sorts of crazy conclusions. It's like, safe, you evil Rafali. What is this narrative that you have come up with? So here's the thing, this is not my narrative. In Kitab al-Ma'rifah wa-Tarikh by al-Fasawi, which is one of the sources that we mentioned, al-Fasawi comments something very interesting, and this is volume 3, page 87 to page 88. He narrates the exact same report. So he narrates the same report, but notice what al-Fasawi comments here. He adds a comment that is very, very disturbing. He says, after narrating the report, he says, وَهَذَا الْمَحَالُ وَأَخَافَ أَنْ يَكُونَ كَذِبٌ وَكَيْفَ يَكُونَ هَذَا وَهُوَ مِمَّنْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ وهو من أهل بدر وهو من يقول له النبي لو كان بعدي نبي لكان عمر وقد كان يكون في الأمم محدثون وإن يكن في أمتي فهو عمر مع ما لا يحصى من هذا الضرب فكيف يجوز أن يقول لحذيفة وأنا من المنافقين ولكن حديث زيد فيه خلل كثير. So what al-Fasawi realized something. He looked at this report and he said this report is unacceptable because he understood its implications. He understood that Omar asking if he is one of the hypocrites means he's one of the hypocrites. So he said, how can this hadith can't be true? There's a problem with Zayd ibn Wahab. It's Zayd ibn Wahab. Zayd ibn Wahab is da'if. And as we know, we're going to see later that Zayd ibn Wahab narrates some other very dangerous reports from Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman. We'll get to them in a bit. But as this conclusion is not one that I came up with in 2024. No, al-Fasawi came up with it when he was writing al-Ma'rifah wa-Tarikh. He immediately connected the dots. He immediately saw the implications of Umar's question, which is again a very, very foolish question to ask. Because imagine today if there was a murder investigation in your city, in your town, and you went up to the constable, you went up to the detective, and you said to him, "Am I a suspect? Was I one of the murderers?" You're going to jail that night. They're going to be interrogating you. They're going to be asking you why on earth you have that question. So, in any case, let us continue going over some of the reports regarding Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman's relationship with Umar ibn al-Khattab. So, we read here, and this is Kitab Musannaf Abdul Razzaq al-San'ani. Musannaf Abdul Razzaq is a very, very important book. It is a primary source, and this is one of the more humorous reports that Abdul Razzaq reports. Abdul Razzaq reports the following. He says that once Umar ibn al-Khattab asked Hudhayfa about the Kallala. Correct? So Kallala is an issue that is very, very interesting because anyone who is familiar with the biography of Umar ibn al-Khattab, they know that Umar very humorously had no idea what Kallala was, and no matter how many times you tried to explain it to him, he would never be able to figure it out. So Ibn Abdul Razzaq, so the other Musannaf Abdul Razzaq in volume 8, page 386, hadith 17,504, he says the following. The Prophet ﷺ was on a journey, and Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman was by his side. Because as we know, Hudhayfa was close with the Prophet. So Rasulullah ﷺ informed Hudhayfa about the ayah regarding Kallala, Surah An-Nisa, ayah 176. So Umar was following behind Hudhayfa. So Hudhayfa turned around and simply explained it to Umar ibn al-Khattab. Correct? He stopped to explain it to Umar. So years later, when Umar became the Khalifa, he asked Hudhayfa about the meaning of Kallala again. And this is very funny. There are reports that indicate that Umar used to ask the Prophet so much about Kallala that the Prophet got annoyed with him and poked him in his chest and essentially gave him an answer that meant, stop asking me about it. So Umar asks Hudhayfa to explain Kallala to him again. And so Hudhayfa said the following to him. He said to him, by Allah, you are a fool if you think that your leadership obligates me to tell you something I didn't tell you then. So Umar responded, I didn't mean that. May Allah have mercy on you. As in, Hudhayfa had that level of hayba that he would even scare Umar off. Like, get away from me. I've explained this to you before. I'm not going to explain this to you again. You are an idiot. And the Arabic, inna wallah, innaka la ahmaq. And this is another example of why this nonsense of adalat al-Sahaba, of the Sahaba, you cannot criticize any of them, you cannot demean them or insult them. So no, Hudhayfa was demeaning Umar ibn al-Khattab, because Umar ibn al-Khattab does not understand what the Kallala is. So Ibn Sirin reported that when Umar read the verse, Allah makes clear to you His law lest you go astray, he said, O Allah, whoever you had made it clear to regarding the matter of Kallala, you have not made it clear to me. So it's like Umar, whenever he would read this verse, he would essentially complain to Allah that you made this verse clear to other people, but you did not make it clear to me. Right? And this brings up another point. What exactly is Kallala? Kallala is a somewhat complex fiqhi issue. I don't like to go too much into fiqh, but to explain it simply, Kallala is a word that refers to someone who dies and they neither have parents nor do they have children. Like, they do not have any typical next of kin. So remember, in the biography of Sayyidina Jabir ibn Abdullah, Jabir was saying that the verse regarding Kallala was revealed about me because I was about to die and my parents were gone and I did not have any children. So I was wondering what would happen to my wealth. But in any case, continuing on regarding the biography of Hudhayfa, now, we want to go over now Hudhayfa's role in the conquest of Iran, because as we know, during the rule of Umar ibn al-Khattab, many conquests happened in the Muslim world. So the conquests are very, very important. The conquests are very, very important to early Islamic history. And a lot of our Shia brothers, particularly ones who have been influenced by the kuffar or who have developed a sort of more Western look at history, where they view conquest as something inherently bad, many of them would be surprised to know that many of the Salaf al-Salih took part in these conquests. And among them was Hudhayfa. Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman was one of the great Muslim commanders during the conquest movement. And so Khalifa ibn Khayyat reports the following in his Kitab al-Tarikh on page 83 to 84. He reports, and this is a very, very long report, I'm not going to read the entire thing, we are going to be summarizing it, that in the year 21 after Hijrah, the Persians, the Sasanians, amassed a massive force to attack the Muslims in Iraq. At this point, the Muslims had taken control of Iraq, but the Persians were trying to counterattack. They were trying to drive the Arabs out of Iraq. And so Umar, what did he do in response? He sent a force from Kufa and Basra to counter them and to conquer their lands. He sent a force from Kufa and Basra to invade Persia itself, to invade Iran itself, and to destroy the problem at its source. And so, according to Khalifa ibn Khayyat, and this is something very interesting, Khalifa ibn Khayyat makes note that the person who advised him to do this was Ali ibn Abi Talib himself. Correct? Khalifa ibn Khayyat reports in his Tarikh, when he is discussing this situation, he says, ثم قال علي يا أمير المؤمنين ابعث إلى أهل الكوفة فليسير ثلثهم أو ثلاثهم وتدع ثلثهم في حفظ في حفظ ذراريهم وتبعث إلى أهل البصرة. So he essentially sent to Ali is essentially telling Umar is like, take a group of the people of Kufa, 2/3 of the people of Kufa, along with the people of Basra, and send them into Iran. Have them invade Iran and end the Sasanian Empire once and for all. And so the reports tell us, if we continue reading Ibn Khayyat's narrative, it says that Umar appointed an-Nu'man ibn Muqrin to lead the conquest of Nahawand. But an-Nu'man was killed in battle. During the siege of Nahawand, an-Nu'man ibn Muqrin was killed in battle. And so the man who took control of the army, his second in command, the man who led the Muslims to victory at Nahawand, was none other than Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman. And so those of you who know Islamic history, you know about the conquests, you know that the Battle of Nahawand, that was the final decisive battle between the Muslims and the Persians. And as in, when the Muslims defeated the Persians at Nahawand, they captured the entire Sasanian aristocracy. There was no more Sasanian government to continue the fight against the Muslims. And so the decisive victory in the war between the Muslims and the Persians came at the hands of Sayyidina Hudhayfa. So Khalif ibn Khayyat further reports, and this is on page 85 to 86 of his Tariq, he further reports that in the year 22 after Hijrah, and I want those of you who are good with geography, if you want to pull this up on a map and follow along, to follow along here on Hudhayfa's his campaign of conquest here. In the year 22 after Hijrah, Hudhayfa campaigned extensively. He conquered Nahawand, Dainawar, Masabadan, Mahdinar, Hamadan, and Ray. So he essentially blitzed through northern Iran, conquering settlement after settlement, and subjugating the local people to Islamic rule. And so, subhanAllah, the people are always whining about Umar the conqueror, Umar conquered the Persian. I'm like, no, it wasn't Umar who did this. This happened in spite of Umar. When Umar got the news that the big bad Persians, the fire worshippers, were coming for him, he freaked out. It was Imam Ali's advice, and it was the leadership of the likes of Hudhayfa, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayh, that allowed the Muslims to overcome the Sasanian Empire. Furthermore, al-Baladhuri, and this is a source that is as old as Khalifa ibn Khayyat, if not older. In Baladhuri's Kitab Futuh al-Buldan, which is his book on the conquest movement, is considered the oldest book on the conquest movement from the Islamic corpus. He reports that during the conquest of Tustar, Hudhayfa commanded the left flank of the Kufan force. Furthermore, Ibn Abdul Barr in Kitab al-Isti'ab, page 138, as well as Ali ibn al-Athir in Kitab Usd al-Ghaba on page 260, they both affirmed that Hudhayfa was indeed the commander responsible for these victories. And so we see that Hudhayfa was not just there during the conquest of Iran. He was the conqueror of a large part of Iran proper. And so all of these cities that we listed, Nahawand, Dainawar, Masabadan, Mahdinar, Hamadan, Ray, as well as Tustar itself, all of these cities, the man responsible for conquering them was Sayyidina Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman. Correct? Now we arrive at something very interesting, at a very interesting episode from the life of Sayyidina Hudhayfa, and that is when Hudhayfa became governor. And I want you to pay attention to the way Hudhayfa treated his subjects and the way he interacted with his subjects when he was the Emir of Madan. Because this is something, we talked about this in the biography of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullah alayhi, when we were discussing his zuhd and the way he would interact with the ra'iyah, is that this is the way an Amir should be. Not to say that Hudhayfa is on the same level as Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullah alayhi. That's Amir al-Mu'mineen. However, Hudhayfa, when we look at his bio, and then later when we look at Ammar, the way he functioned as governor of Kufa, we see that these men set an outstanding example, and that the Muslim world needs more leadership like this. Muhammad ibn Sa'ad reported in Kitab al-Tabaqat, and this is a very interesting report. This is a very humorous report as well. They report that he reports with his isnad on the authority of Muhammad ibn Sirin, the famous tabi'i. He says the following. He says that when Umar would appoint a governor, he would write a letter of appointment. And that letter of appointment is essentially the governor would take that letter to the local people, and she would read it out to them, and the people would essentially they would know that this is now their governor. This is the Amir, the Khalifa's governor over that city. So the letter read, you should listen to him and obey him as long as he exercises justice. However, this is what Umar usually wrote. It's like, you must obey him as long as he is just. However, when Umar appointed Hudhayfa as the governor of al-Madain, Ctesiphon, which is, those of you who are curious, it is south of Baghdad. Today it's mostly ancient ruins, but back in the day it used to be a very important city. It was once the capital of the Sasanian Empire. So he wrote the following letter to the people of Madain. He said, listen to him, obey him, and give him whatever he asks you for. So Hudhayfa left Umar with a donkey fitted with a carriage to carry his goods. Correct? The word carriage here, the translation here may be a bit wonky. I think I've seen some reports say that it's somewhat like a carpet or a blanket that is placed on the back of a donkey. Correct? So Hudhayfa got on his donkey and he made his way from Medina to Iraq. So when Hudhayfa arrived in Madain, keep in mind, Madain was the capital of the Sasanian Empire. It is a massive city. So the people there were eagerly waiting for their new emir, for the governor of the former capital of the empire. And so they awaited for Hudhayfa. The local people gathered, the farmers and the dahaqin. The dahaqin were the upper class, the land-owning class. And so Hudhayfa, he arrived on the back of his donkey with a piece of bread and a bone with some meat on it in his hand. So imagine these people are expecting some grand vizier, with an armed escort, and they got Hudhayfa, the companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who arrived on his donkey with a piece of bread and a piece of meat, and he was essentially having lunch as he entered the city. Correct? Or he was having a snack as he entered the city. So the people came to him, and he read the letter of appointment out to them. And so the people said to him, you may ask us for whatever you want. The Khalifa told us to give you whatever you want. So what is it that you want, Ya Amir? So Hudhayfa radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi said to them, all I want is some food for me to eat and some fodder for my donkey as long as I'm with you. That's it. That is the only thing that Hudhayfa requested, is food for himself and feed fodder for his donkey. Correct? For his stumper. So Hudhayfa remained governor of Madain for a while, and so Umar called him back to Medina. So when Umar got the news that Hudhayfa was in the area, that he was approaching Medina, Umar decided that he wanted to spy on Hudhayfa. And this is very interesting. Umar has this thing, we'll cover this more in the Bio of Hudhayfa, he loves to spy on people. As we know, Umar was not very good with the Quran. Umar, for being the Hasbuna Kitabullah guy, he had some trouble remembering the Quran. And so the Quran, had he read the Quran, he would know that it says you shouldn't spy on people. You shouldn't spy on your fellow Muslims. But in any case, Umar decided that he wanted to see how Hudhayfa would return to Medina. So he hid on the side of one of the roads, and he waited for Hudhayfa. And so Hudhayfa came back in the exact same condition he had left in. Hudhayfa had left Medina on a donkey, and he came back on that same donkey. No more wealthy and no more extravagant than before. And so Umar came out to greet Hudhayfa, and so he embraced him and said to him, you are my brother and I am yours. And to Umar I say, no, his brother is Ammar. Your brother is that other guy. I don't even remember his name. Correct? In any case, Ibn Sa'd further reports, and this can be found on the same scan that we put up before, and this is also reported in Kitab Hilyat al-Awliya by Abi Nu'aym al-Isfahani in volume 1, page 277. They report the following for us. They say, when Hudhayfa arrived in Madain, he arrived riding atop a mat mounted on top of his donkey, and he was eating a piece of bread and he was chewing on some meat that was on a bone. So Talha ibn Musarraf, I believe is his name, adds that at the time, Hudhayfa's legs were dangling on the side of the donkey. As in, Hudhayfa was not sitting on the donkey with one leg on either side. Both of his legs were hanging off of one side of the donkey. And so this is very interesting. You see that this report is corroborated. This is very famous because no doubt many people would have seen this. They would have been expecting the governor to arrive on horseback with an entourage, and they got Hudhayfa riding on his donkey. So Ibn Sa'd also reports from Mujahid, the famous tabi'i, He says, Hudhayfa headed towards al-Mada'in and he passed by a dihqan. So a dihqan, and I'm going to put up the scan from the Encyclopedia of Islam. This is a term that you need to know when studying the Islamic political hierarchy. So a dihqan was a term for the members of a class of lesser land-owning nobility in the Sassanid Empire. And when the Muslims conquered Iraq and Iran, the dihqans, they kept that system. These were essentially the local, like, large landowners, correct? The bourgeoisie, if you will. So the report says that when Hudhayfa came to Mada'in, a dihqan invited him over and offered him food. So Hudhayfa ate from it, and then the man brought some water in a silver vessel. Correct? He brought Hudhayfa some water in a silver vessel. So he took the vessel and he struck the dihqan's face with it. So the narrator was Mujahid. He says that Hudhayfa was a very strict man. He was a very austere man. He was a very, he had that haiba. He was not someone that was easy to approach. So he said Hudhayfa was very strict, and whenever we asked him about something, he would remain silent and he would not speak to us about it. But when we refrained from asking him, he spoke to us. So when we saw him do this to the dihqan tried to pour him some water out of a silver vessel, and Hudhayfa took the vessel and he smashed it against the dihqan's face. So Hudhayfa looked at us and he said, "Do you know what prompted me to do this to him?" We said, "No, ya sahib Rasulullah. No, companion of Rasulullah, we do not know." So he said, "I passed by him before this incident, and he offered me water in this vessel, but I refused to drink from it, and now he brought it to me again. What prompted me to do this was that I heard Rasulullah say, 'Do not drink from vessels of gold and silver, nor eat from them, nor wear silk or brocade, for these are for the disbelievers in the dunya, but they are for you in the akhirah.'" Correct? Another report, and this report is also very interesting for those of you who love Iraqi history and geography. In Tabaqat ibn Sa'd reports the following. He says, this is on page 254, with his isnad to Abi Ishaq al-Subay'i, the famous tabi'i. He said that when Hudhayfa was in Mada'in, he would visit Kufa every Friday. Every Friday he would go to Kufa. He would go and pray in Kufa. Now someone must ask the question, why is Hudhayfa going out of his way to visit Kufa? Could it be that Kufa is a special city and that the people who mock Kufa and mock the people who love Kufa are actually munharifin an Hudhayfa wa Salaf al-Salih? We'll leave that to the viewers, inshallah. Now, here are some of the reports regarding Hudhayfa's Zuhd. Correct? Some of the reports regarding Hudhayfa's detachment from the dunya. We read in Tabaqat ibn Sa'd in volume 4, page 254. I believe this is the same scan. There is a report here, and this is reported also by Abu Nu'aym in Kitab Hilyat al-Awliya. I'm sorry, the last report, the report I'm about to read is on page 255 of Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, and is also in Kitab Hilyat al-Awliya by Abi Nu'aym al-Isfahani in volume 1, page 278. They report that Musa ibn Abdullah ibn Yazid from Salama, and Abu Bakr, one of the narrators, commented that she was his mother. Musa ibn Abdullah ibn Yazid, his mother was Salama, who was, I believe, the daughter of Hudhayfa. So this is Hudhayfa's grandson. He narrates that Hudhayfa once said, "I wish I had someone to manage my finances so that I could then close the door behind me and not enter upon anyone until I meet Allah." So Hudhayfa is essentially saying, I'm so sick of this dunya. If only I could have someone to manage my finances, I would never have to do it again myself. I could dedicate myself to worship and to my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Correct? Abu Nu'aym al-Isfahani further reports, this is also in his Kitab Hilyat al-Awliya, in volume 1, page 279, he says, and he reports from Abdullah ibn Sayyidan from Hudhayfa, he says, "May Allah curse those who are not of us. By Allah," and this report is about al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy an al-munkar. He says, "May Allah curse those who are not of us. By Allah, you must command what is right and forbid what is wrong, or there will be a conflict among you, there will be a fight among you, and then your evil ones will overpower your righteous ones. They will be killed until no one remains who enjoins what is right and forbids what is wrong. Then you will supplicate to Allah, but He will not answer you due to your conflicts." And I say, Sayyidi, this did indeed come to pass. especially among, in the Islamic world as a whole, but among the people of Iraq especially, is that not enough people did Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar, and so the Zalimeen dominated the Muslim Ummah. And as a result, we lost many good men. Many of them died as shuhada. Many of them were killed for speaking out against this dhulm. And so then, the rulers were replaced by one tyrant worse than the other. Correct? This next report can be found in Jami' at-Tirmidhi, Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, and Hilyat al-Awliya. And we're going to quote it from at-Tirmidhi for brevity's sake. At-Tirmidhi reports in Hadith 2169, he says that from Abu Raqad, who says, I went out with my master while I was still a young boy, and he assigned me to Hudhayfa. So he's not saying Hudhayfa is his master. He's saying Abu Raqad is he was a slave or a mawla of another man. So his master commanded him to serve Hudhayfa. So he says, I heard Hudhayfa say, I hear some of you 4 times making a statement that if spoken during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would render a person a hypocrite. You must enjoin good, forbid evil, and encourage each other to do good. Otherwise, Allah will uproot you people with punishment. Alternatively, Allah shall grant the worst of you authority over you, after which the supplications of even the best of you will not be answered. And this is a very ominous warning from Sayyidina Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman. And once again, we highlight that when we look at Islamic history, we see this indeed came to pass. Hudhayfa radhiyallahu ta'ala alayhi also narrates a very unique fadila of al-Kufa, and this can be found in multiple books such as Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, Tabaqat ibn Sa'ad, Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Musnad Abi Dawood al-Tayalisi, and lastly in Kitab al-Mu'jam al-Kabir by al-Tabarani and al-Bazzar. All of them report with their chains of transmission to Sayyidina Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman, and for brevity's sake we'll quote it from Ibn Abi Shayba. He quotes the following. This is a very interesting report from Hudhayfa regarding the city of Kufa. He said there are no tents or settlements, alternatively, after the tents of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at Badr that will be protected from what threatens them like these, meaning the city of Kufa. This report was authentic. The tradition was certified by al-Haythami in Majma' al-Zawaid. He certifies the reports of, I believe it's Ahmad and al-Bazzar, as well as al-Tabarani. And he does it in volume 10, page 36 to 37, hadiths 16,684 and 16,685. And so Hudhayfa is essentially saying that Allah loves this city, and Allah, the only other homes that Allah would go out of his way to protect, as he protects Kufa, the only ones even comparable were the tents of Rasulullah himself before the Battle of Badr, or during the Battle of Badr. So this is another unique manqaba of the city of Kufa. Now we're going to go over some of the reports of Hudhayfa regarding his knowledge of the fitan, as well as some of the fiqh that has been narrated on his authority. And we've already gone over some here and there. We read in Kitab Sunan Abi Dawood, and this is the not Abi Dawood al-Tayalisi, this is Abu Dawood al-Sijistani, this is one of the big 6. In Sunan Abi Dawood, hadith 4,244, he narrates with his chain to Subay ibn Khalid, who says, I came to Kufa at the time when Tustar was conquered, and I took some mules from it. When I entered the mosque of Kufa, I found there people of moderate stature, and among them was a man whom you could recognize when you saw him that he was from the people of Hijaz. And this man was none other than Sayyidina Hudhayfa. So I asked, who is this man? So the people frowned at me and said, do you not recognize him? This is Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman, the companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Hudhayfa said, people used to ask Rasulullah about good, and I used to ask him about evil. Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj reports with his isnad to Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman. He reports the following. He says, I asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no doubt we had an evil time, meaning the days of Jahiliyyah, and Allah brought us a good time, and that is, of course, Islam, through which we are now living. Then he asked, will there be a bad time after this good time? As we saw in the previous report, Hudhayfa, people are always asking Rasulullah about the good things that will come to pass. He says, I was more interested in in the bad things. I was wanting to look out for these calamities that would happen in the future. So Rasulullah told him, yes. Said, yeah, absolutely. There will be a bad time after this. And so Hudhayfa reports, he says, I then asked the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, will there be a good time after that bad time? So Rasulullah said to him, yes. Correct? So the report continues. Hudhayfa says, will there be a bad time after that good time? And Rasulullah said, yes. So Hudhayfa says, I then asked the Prophet, how? So whereupon Rasulullah said, there will be leaders who will not be led by my guidance and who will not adopt my ways. There will be among them men who have the hearts of devils in the bodies of human beings. So Hudhayfa said, what should I do, Ya Rasulullah, if I happen to live in that time? So he replied, you will listen to the Emir and carry out his orders. Even if your back is flogged and your wealth is snatched, you should listen and obey. Now, a few comments here. Many of the Mukhalifeen use this report to justify their blind loyalty to their umara. And it does not take a genius to realize that that interpretation is wrong, because we have authentic reports from Amir al-Muminoon, as well as al-Hasanain, where they say something along the lines of La ta'ata li makhluq ma'siyat al-khaliq. So that sort of pro-Umawi, pro-Abbasi interpretation of this hadith is unacceptable if the hadith is reliable, if it is indeed true. An interpretation that can be accepted is that the Amir here is referring to the Prophet's genuine successor. Correct? He's referring to Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullah alayh. He is referring to the Imam. In this situation, the Imam, no matter what he orders you to do, he is wajib al-ta'a, because he is ma'soom. So that interpretation is more acceptable, and Allah knows best. Abu Dawood further reports, and this is another report from Sunan Abi Dawood, hadith 4240. Abu Dawood says the following. He reports the following with his isnad to Hudhayfa himself. He says, Rasulullah stood amongst us to give an address, and he left out nothing that would happen up to the last hour without telling of it. Some remembered it and some forgot, and these companions of his have known it. When something of it which I have forgotten happens, I remembered it, just as a man remembers another's face when he is away and recognizes him when he sees him. And so this report is very, very interesting because it indicates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he warned the Sahaba about many of the fitan and many of the problems that they would encounter. However, many of them either willingly forgot his advice or dismissed it. But Hudhayfa here, you see that Hudhayfa, he's saying that I did my best to remember it, and even the stuff that I forgot, whenever these things come to pass, I would remember it. I say, yes, Rasulullah did mention this. Rasulullah did warn us about this. And so Ibn Abdul Barr reports something very, very powerful in his biography of Sayyidina Hudhayfa. He says, once Hudhayfa was asked, what's the worst fitna? Correct? So he was asked, and this is at the very end of the biography. It says, سئل حذيفة أي الفتن أشد؟ قال أن يعرض عليك الخير والشر فلا تدري أيهما تركب. It says the worst fitna, the worst trial of all, is that al-khayr wa shar are put before you, and you do not know which one to choose. Correct? And subhanAllah, to this day we have people who you ask them about Ali and Muawiyah, and they'll say, "Oh, I remain neutral. It was a fitna. I don't know. Ya akhi, al-khayr wa shar is being put before you, and you don't know which one is which. That is the worst fitna of all. Correct? Ibn Abdul Barr further reports, وقال حذيفة لا تقوم الساعة حتى يسود كل قبيلة منافقوها. So he says that the final hour will not come until the hypocrites of every tribe become its leaders. Now, regarding some of the fiqh of Sayyidina Hudhayfa, this is a very, very rare report, and it is a very important report. Correct? So, in Kitab al-Kamil fi Du'afa al-Rijal by Ibn Adi al-Jurjani, and this report is weak by the standard of the Mukhalifeen, and you're about to see why. The narrator here who is weakened is Yahya al-Jabir, and you'll see why he's weakened, is because he narrated this. He says, Isa, the Mawla of Hudhayfa, the freedman of Hudhayfa, led us in Salatul Janazah, and he said takbir 5 times. The Mukhalifeen, how many takbirat do they say in Salatul Janazah? Those of you who have studied the differences in fiqh between the madhahib, you'll know the answer. How many takbirat do they say? They say 4, correct? The Imamiyya, in the school of the Ahlul Bayt, we say 5. And so Isa Mawla Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman, in his Salatul Janazah, he said takbir 5 times. Then he says, by Allah, I neither forgot nor was I confused, but I did as the righteous servant Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman did. Then he said, by Allah, I neither forgot nor was I confused, but your prophet said takbir 5 times, so I said takbir 5 times. Any man who narrates this is going to get weakened in the books of the Mukhalifin. If you narrate something like this, of course they're going to weaken you, because you are telling them that their fiqh is wrong, and that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa and Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman, the way they used to pray Salatul Janazah is the way that the Shia pray it today. Another interesting report regarding fiqh, regarding the Sharia, is reported in Kitab Sunan Abi Dawud, Hadith 598. And this is a very wholesome hadith about Hudhayfa and his close friend Ammar ibn Yasir, radiyallahu ta'ala alayh. Abu Dawood reports with his chain to Adi ibn Thabit al-Ansari that a man related to me, he narrated to me that once he was in the company of Ammar ibn Yasir in al-Mada'in. So the iqama was called for prayer, and Ammar came forward and stood on a shop or a beach and prayed while the people stood on a lower place than he. So Ammar was praying on something elevated. So Hudhayfa came forward and took him by the hands, and Ammar followed him till Hudhayfa brought him down. When Ammar finished his prayer, Hudhayfa asked him, did you not hear Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say, when a man leads the people in prayer, he must not stand in a position higher than theirs? Or words to that effect? So Ammar replied, that is why I followed you when you took me by the hand. So this report confirms what Amir al-Muminoon salamullahi alayhi said about Ammar. He said, Ammar is a mu'min, but sometimes he forgets. But when you remind Ammar, he doesn't cope, he doesn't play games. So here Hudhayfa reminded Ammar. He gave Ammar a reminder, and Ammar did not, he did not become arrogant, or he did not try to argue with him. He said he remembered, and he said, yes, he's right, I cannot pray this way. Correct? Now, and we will conclude this session, inshallah, with this batch of reports. Let us go over the issue of Taqiyah. Because Hudhayfa is one of the most important companions of Rasulullah when it comes to Taqiyah. And subhanAllah, the fact that Ammar and Hudhayfa, the two brothers, these two close companions, these two close friends, both of them, in their biographies, we learn many important lessons about Taqiyah. But many people don't know the reports related to Hudhayfa and Taqiyah. So Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj, Sahih Muslim, reports the following in Hadith 149. He reports the following. He says, on the authority of Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman, he says that we were in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and he said, count for me those who profess Islam. So Rasulullah is essentially asking, how many Muslims do we have now? So we said, Ya Rasulullah, do you entertain any fear concerning us? And we are at this time between 600 and 700 in strength. MashaAllah, Islam has now reached 600, 700. If only Hudhayfa knew in a few years he'd be conquering Iran, correct? Thousands of people would be entering Islam. So they're saying, Ya Rasulullah, we're 600 people, and we're not we're not that handful that we used to be in Mecca. We're strong now. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, in his great wisdom, he remarked, you don't perceive, you may be put to trial. And so Hudhayfa said, we actually suffered trial so much that some of our men were constrained to offer their prayers in concealment. Now, when we think of the Sahaba praying in secret, what time period are we thinking of? We're thinking about Mecca, correct? Think about those early days in Mecca and Dar Arqam. What on earth is Hudhayfa talking about? We suffered so much trial that some of our men were constrained to offer their prayer in concealment. Hang on a minute. Hudhayfa lived in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He lived in the time of Abu Bakr, the time of Umar, the time of Uthman, and for 40 days of the Khilafah of Amir al-Muminoon. Which rulers is he referring to here in this report? And why were these rulers basically oppressing the Muslims to the point where some of them had to pray in secret. What on earth is going on here? We will look at some of the other reports of Hudhayfah and see if we can find the answer ourselves. Ibn Sa'd reports the following in Kitab al-Tabaqat in volume 4. This is in his biography of Sayyidina Hudhayfah. In volume 4, page 256, he said once that Hudhayfah said, "Every word I speak that prevents me from receiving 20 lashes of the whip, I will speak it." Ibn Sa'd reported with another chain that Hudhayfah radhiyallahu ta'ala alayhi said, "I purchase my religion part by part, fearing that it might all disappear." What is this practice called? This is called Taqiyah, plain and simple. And we'll give some even more clear examples. Al-Bukhari, and this is very amazing that Bukhari actually narrated this without censoring this report. Perhaps Bukhari did not perceive the ramifications of the report. So we read in Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith 6056. He says the following, and this is the chapter, Bab ma yukrah min al-namima, wal-'ayadhu billah. So it is reported, now I'll read the isnad here because the intro to the hadith is very important. حدثنا أبو نعيم حدثنا سفيان عن منصور عن إبراهيم عن همام قال كنا مع حذيفة فقيل له إن رجلا يرفع الحديث إلى عثمان. A man is spying on us and he is reporting back to Uthman. فقال حذيفة سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يقول لا يدخل الجنة قتات. A qattat is a namam, a talebearer. He's the that all of you have seen someone like this. Wal-'iyadhu billah. You know that one person who's always trying to cause fitna between people. It's like, oh, well, Fulan said this about you. Oh, Fulan, you should have heard what he was saying about you the other day. Oh, he said this about her. He said this about him. This hadith is corroborated by the reports of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Is that a namima is haram. And one of the characteristics of the people of hellfire is that they are talebearers. And so Hudhayfah is calling out Uthman's spy. It says Uthman's spy is not going to Jannah. Now that begs the question, why is Uthman spying on Hudhayfah to begin with? Now, subhanAllah, when we look at Sahih Muslim, and this is very unusual, usually it's Bukhari who censors the report, and then we get the uncensored version in Muslim or in Ibn Abi Shayba or one of these other books. But now it's the other way around. In the hadith of Bukhari, he clearly says that it is Uthman. But in Sahih Muslim, look at what Muslim did with the report. He narrates the exact same report. He says, كَانَ رَجُلْ يَنْقُلُ الْحَدِيثِ إِلَى الْأَمِيرِ. He removed Uthman's name and replaced it with what? Al-Amir. I wonder which Amir is being referred to here. And this is reported in Sahih Muslim Hadith 105b as well as 105c. So who's Hudhayfah using Taqiyah with? It's Uthman ibn Affan. Correct? And this indicates something even more dangerous. We see here that if Hudhayfah was willing to use Taqiyah with Uthman, what makes you think he wasn't using it when he was speaking to Umar? When Umar was interrogating him regarding the idea if he was one of the munafiqeen? Ibn Sa'd further reports, and this is also on page 256 in al-Tabaqat al-Kubra, and this is a very, very important report. This batch of reports on page 256 is very, very important. He says, An-Nazzal ibn Sabra says, we were in Mecca in the house, Baytullah al-Haram, and with us were Hudhayfah and Uthman. So Uthman said to Hudhayfah, or rather not this is not a reference to the house, is a house. We're in the house of Uthman, or one of the houses where they were meeting. So he says, Uthman said to Hudhayfah, I heard such and such about you. Hudhayfah, is it true what you've been saying about me? What exactly have you been saying about me? Correct? The report in Arabic says, فقال عثمان لحذيفة ما شيء بلغني عنك أنت قلت كذا وكذا. And this كذا وكذا, I really wish I knew what it was, but I haven't been able to track it down. فقال حذيفة ما قلته وما قلته قال وكنا قد سمعناه منه. So Nazzal ibn Sabra is like, we just heard Hudhayfah lie to Uthman, because Hudhayfah had told Uthman, I did not say this, but we had heard Hudhayfah say this about Uthman. Correct? So the report continues. It says, فَلَمَّا خَرَجْ قُلْنَا أَلَمْ تَكُنْ قُلْتَ قَالْ بَلَى وَلَكِنِّي أَشْتَرِي دِينِي بَعْضُهُ بِبَعْضٍ مَخَافَ أَنْ يَذْهَبَ كُلَّهُ. So he says, I did. But I give one part of my religion up, fearing that it will all disappear. I give up a part to save the whole. Correct? Ibn Sa'd further reports, he further reports, and this can be seen in, you see here, Kitab al-Tabaqat on the same page. He further reports with his isnad that Hudhayfa used to say, ما أدرك هذا الأمر أحد من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إلا قد اشترى بعض دينه ببعض. قالوا وأنت؟ قال وأنا والله إني لأدخل على أحدهم وليس أحد إلا فيه محاسن ومساوئ فأذكر من محاسنه وأعرض عما سوى ذلك وربما دعاني أحدهم إلى الغداء فأقول إني صائم ولست بصائم. So in English, what does that say? It says, Hudhayfa used to say none of the companions of Rasulullah grasped this matter, i.e. Islam, except that he brought some of his religion with some other part, which, as we said, is a reference to Taqiyah. So they asked him, even you? He said, even I. By Allah, I would enter upon one of them, these rulers, and there would be not one of them except that he has both merits and faults. So I would remember his merits and overlook his faults. So when Umar asks Hudhayfa, am I one of the munafiqeen, correct? Hudhayfa, he's telling you, what do I do when I'm with these rulers? I only mention their merits. And perhaps one of them would invite me for lunch, and I would say that I am fasting, although I am not fasting. Correct? Now, there is something that we have to note here. There is a group of people, the mukhalifin, as we know, they're always, projecting their problems onto us. There's a group of people, what they like to do as a way to simply dismiss the Shia hadith corpus. You believe your imams do taqiyah. How can the imam do taqiyah? Isn't the imam supposed to guide people? I say, Ya Ahmaq, in your books it is reported with authentic chains that Hudhayfa, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, used to do taqiyah. Is Hudhayfa not supposed to guide the Muslim ummah? Is he not one of the Sahaba? Is he not one of the Salaf? And if one of them were to say, well, wait a minute, you are simply interpreting the hadith. When Hudhayfa says, I am purchasing one part of my religion for another, that does not mean taqiyah. We say, yes, it does. And there's proof for this. Firstly, the same report can be found in Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah, in volume 18, page 351, hadith 35,260. Ibn Abi Shaybah, what chapter did he put this hadith in? And note that the isnad is sahih. It's in Kitab al-Taqiyah. It's the last hadith in the chapter on Taqiyah. Furthermore, the so-called mutakallim of Ahl Sunnah, Ibn Qutaybah, in his book Ta'wil Mukhtalaf al-Hadith, he cites this same report, and he explains it as being what? As being Taqiyah. Correct? So he was refuting in Nadham. Right? And Nadham was a Mu'tazili polemicist. So Ibn Qutaybah says, وَذَكَرَ النَّظَّامُ حُذَيْفَةُ بْنِ الْيَمَانِ فَقَالَ جَعَلَ يَحْلِفْ لِعُثْمَانَ عَلَى أَشْيَاء بِاللَّهِ تَعَالَى مَا قَالَهَا وَقَدْ سَمَعُوهُ قَالَهَا فقيل له في ذلك فقال إني أشتري ديني بعضه ببعض مخافة أن يذهب كله. رواه مسعر بن كدام عن عبد الملك بن ميسرة عن النزال بن سبرة. Correct? And so this leaves very, very little doubt as to what Hudhayfa radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi is saying. He is admitting to his close disciples that he is using taqiyah when it comes to the rulers. And so we ask our mukhalifin, if this is the way that Hudhayfa and the followers of the Ahlul Bayt used to deal with your so-called Rashidun caliphs, what about the tyrants of Bani Umayyah and Bani al-Abbas? You expect our imams to be open with them? You expect our imams not to use taqiyah under such rulers and in such a mujtama? Correct? Now, there is one last report that I wish to cite. Lastly, in order to wrap this up, inshallah, this is Kitab al-Mabsut by Sarkhasi. I believe I'm saying his name correctly. And I wish I could find a better print of this book. I think there's a Dar al-Kutub al-Ilmiya print out there somewhere. I'm still looking for it, so I do beg the audience's forgiveness. But this is a very, very important report. So bear with me. The report says, and this is a faqih, I believe he's a Hanafi faqih. So he explains the following on page, let's see which volume this is. This is volume number 22, page 46. So he says, وَقَدْ كَانَ حُذَيْفَةٌ رضوان الله تعالى عليه ممن يستعمل التقية على ما روى أنه يداري رجلا فقيل له إنك منافق فقال لا ولكني أشتري ديني بعضه ببعض مخافة أن يذهب كله. And so this is a faqih, one of the fuqaha of the mukhalifin, admitting that this is what? That this is taqiyah. And Hudhayfa used to use taqiyah. And when people used to accuse him of being a munafiq, which subhanAllah is the same thing that they do with our imams, claim, if the imam uses taqiyah, he's a munafiq. Correct? This is a nonsensical argument, and we will go into more depth refuting it in the biography of Sayyidina Umar. But in any case, this is a clear admission that this was indeed taqiyah. And we have also seen that Ibn Abi Shaybah included this report in his chapter on Taqiyah, and that the isnad is sahih. And so with that being said, we'll bring this session to a close. We hope you all enjoyed, we hope you all benefited, and we shall catch you next time, where we will go over the relationship between Hudhayfa and Uthman, as well as the last years of Hudhayfa's life and his death. So please keep us in your dua, and we will end with Surah Al-Fatiha. تسبقها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل